One of the more difficult pieces of the entire recruiting process is when you get to the end and it's now time to negotiate with that candidate. It might be negotiating terms of compensation. It might be negotiating terms of the title, relocation, whether it's remote or in the office. It could be a host of things that need to be negotiated. And it can be difficult at times in order to do that. But I think there's at least 5 things that we all have to keep in mind when we think about effective negotiating. One of the first things that we should consider is that negotiating isn't actually something that we should be waiting to the end to do. Negotiating really starts all the way in the beginning of the recruitment process, from that initial interview with candidates and understanding what's important to them. What are they willing to give up on? What are they not willing to give up on? If we're waiting to the end to begin the process of negotiating on titles and compensation, we have given the ultimate power of negotiating to the candidate as opposed to retaining it for ourselves. Another thing that we've got to really pay attention to is this idea that, or the truth, that negotiating is all about emotion, because candidates buy emotionally and they justify rationally. Often when we get involved in negotiating, we focus on the practical. We focus on the dollars and cents. We focus on the title itself. But what we have to understand is that as human beings, what we're triggered by, or what we make decisions by, is the emotional side of what's going on. And in recruiting, we make the mistake to negotiate with the rational, and we forget about the emotional. We have to understand that truth. Candidates buy emotionally and justify rationally. Another truth we have to understand is these 3 things is what we need to know, or what we need to know about the candidate. Number 1, are those things that they have in their current job that they need to keep. The second thing that they need to know, that you need to know about the candidate, are the things that they currently have that they no longer want. The third thing that you have to know are the things they do not have that they want in their next role. Usually what we do when we get to negotiating at the end is focus on the 2 or 3 things that are pain points, the things that they don't have in their current job, and we go right into the dollars, the practical piece. We have to address the things they have in their current role that they want to keep. If we don't do that and only address the couple of things that they're unhappy about, when we get to the end, they'll begin to justify rationally. We don't have enough emotion actually in there. We're not tilting the scales enough. So we have to understand, what do they have they want to keep? What do they have they want to get rid of? And what they don't have that they want in their next role. Another key point in negotiating with candidates is negotiating through the entire process and testing those pieces that are most important to the candidate. For example, is working remote as important to you as having that connection with your leader that you don't have today? And continuing that through the entire process, leading all the way through and up to the point of offer. So you're negotiating, as I mentioned in another session, is starting from the beginning, and the test closes, the testing of the importance of each of those things that the candidate has actually described. Often we hear, this is what's important to me from the candidate, and we take it at face value. What we have to do and understand is we have to test it to see if it's as important as what the candidate has shared with us. And another key point when negotiating an offer, getting to that final piece of actually presenting the final offer, of presenting and negotiating, is to start that conversation with the emotional piece. In beginning the conversation, with those things that are most important to the candidate emotionally. Mr. or Mrs. Candidate, these were the 3 things that you suggested were most important to you. Let's go through each one to make sure that we've addressed it. The first one was your ability to work remote. Are you comfortable in the fact that we've given you what you need and we've addressed it? Yes, that's exactly what I needed. Number 1, the emotion starts to go up. The second thing that was most important to you was exposure to executive leadership. Have we addressed that? Are you comfortable with that? As you go through each one of these emotional triggers, what's happening? The emotion continues to increase. If one of those emotional triggers becomes a no, it gives you the opportunity to address it before you get into the actual offer. In essence, what you're doing here is pre-negotiating through emotion before you actually get into negotiating just with the practical numbers and titles and so forth, avoiding the back and forth on the practical. As they start to negotiate on the practical, asking for more dollars, asking for more elevated title, continue to go back to those things that were most important from an emotional perspective. And it starts to give you the upper hand in negotiating those practical things. If you pre-negotiate, when you get to the end, negotiation becomes much easier.